Hi everyone. This is something that I thought might be useful for several reasons, I guess. One for me, my my sanity, I suppose, and perhaps for anybody else who kind of ends up going through the same thing. And I know there's a lot of people who do, although perhaps not quite in the same circumstances. So in March, so what are we now? August, so what? Nearly 6 months ago, so beginning of March. As some of you will know, if you already know me, or some of you won't, I was 19 weeks pregnant with this young lady here. There she is. And she's gorgeous. So I was 19 weeks pregnant, and it was just after my birthday, my 34th birthday, and I'd been to the doctor about a lump in my neck, which was a swollen lymph node. They thought initially that it might have just been because it was winter and I was fighting something off, and they said, come back if it's still bothering you in a couple of months. And it was still there, so I went back to the doctor. At that point, I then ended up having a biopsy, and then that all led up to the beginning of March when I got called in, and they told me that I had Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a kind of blood cancer. I'm not quite sure how it's different to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or how it's different to leukemia, which are also both kinds of blood cancer, but that's what it is. And they said that it was. They felt that it was quite slow moving because I didn't have any other symptoms or anything like that. So they said that's fine. You carry on. We'll start doing things once you have a baby. So fast forward through a few months of really weird things with lockdown and pandemics and not being able to leave the house. I didn't really leave the house between March and July. And then it was really uncomfortable anyway, just because I was enormous. So that was that really. They said they were going to induce me. So I kind of, she came along a little bit early so that they could get going with chemotherapy and get it all sorted, and everyone was very happy about the prognosis, which was great. So then on the 15th of July, I went in to have my induction. I was awake for about 48 hours after that when attempt after attempt, which is quite painful. If you don't know what happens in induction, look it up. I ended up having to have a C-section. So she came out the sunroof. She obviously didn't want to come out at all, but we kind of dragged her out, kicking and screaming, quite literally. And then here she was, and that was all joyous. And then everything that had been kind of put at the back of my mind, I suppose, for the few months prior to that, suddenly became quite real. And the thing about Hodgkin's that I've discovered is that it's very easy to kind of gloss over the fact that it's that it's cancer, because you can call it lymphoma, you can call it Hodgkin's, and that kind of deflects from the fact that that's what it is. It is cancer. It might be infinitely curable, but it is cancer, and it's not curable for everybody, and that is something that I have had one or two meltdowns over. Probably more so since Anastasia was born. That's her name. And I've spent some time. She's 6 weeks old now, so I've had some time to kind of spend with her, which has been very nice. Equally, it's difficult. Kind of looking at her and holding her and thinking, actually, am I going to get to see her grow up? So that's been a bit difficult on a couple of occasions, but but for the most part, you've got to try and be optimistic, and everyone says, yeah, you've got this, you'll smash it. Be brave, be strong. You're so optimistic, you're so good-humoured. And that's the joy of social media, I suppose. You can just put on the brave face, and stick a laugh emoji on the end of your post, and everyone thinks everything's all right, when actually, it really isn't. So everything's been fast forwarded a little bit, and I've kind of had chats about chemotherapy, etc. I went for my PET scan, and then I got called into the haematologist's office, and they said, right, okay, so what the PET scan has found is that you've actually got some lymphoma in your hip. Now, I immediately said to her, is that my left hip by any chance? Because I've been having really severe pain in my left hip since October last year. So presumably that's how long at least the cancer has been in my body in one format or another. So I then went and had to have some x-rays on the same day. They kind of sent me quite urgently down to see this orthopaedic surgeon, who showed me a picture of my hip. And basically there's hardly anything of it left. It's on the very verge of snapping. Everyone apparently has been looking at it with horror and wondering how it hasn't snapped already. I've barely left my bed since then, because I'm now paranoid every step that I take is going to break it. And then there's the other issue, which is, when, imagine you've been doing some work in the garden or something, and you come in at the end of the day, and all of a sudden you notice that there's a cut on your arm that you've got from a thorn or whatever in the garden. You haven't noticed it up to that point. And then you notice it, and then all of a sudden it starts hurting and it stings, and that's, your brain knows it's there and therefore it hurts. Now, if you imagine something that's been giving you debilitating pain already every day, and then your brain realises that actually there's a massive hole in your hip, and the pain gets worse because your brain knows that that's what it is and it's there, and so that's a thing. So I've hardly left my bed. So I've either been in bed or sitting on a chair doing jigsaw puzzle. That's been the last couple of days. And the long and short of it is, I've now got to have an urgent hip replacement. I'm 34, and I've got to have a new hip. Also, because it's involved with my bones, that means that the stage of the lymphoma is stage 4. That doesn't necessarily mean what it might mean if it was like, a different kind of cancer, where the stages can have an effect on prognosis and how likely you are to get through it and things like that. It does just mean how advanced it is, so that's something, I suppose. But because it's stage 4, that means that basically what's being recommended is a kind of chemotherapy called Beer-Cop, which is 7 different chemicals. It's pretty toxic. And it almost guarantees that unlike what I was hoping for, we won't be able to have any more children. I would have really liked a little brother or sister for Anastasia, but I think it's very unlikely that's going to be possible. So those are all the kind of things that in the last 24 hours have been kind of thrown on our laps, like it wasn't enough that there is cancer to deal with. There's now the fact that I've got to have a new hip fairly urgently, which is going to put chemotherapy off for another 3 weeks until that's healed, and that I've got to have a pretty severe form of chemotherapy in order to try and fix it, which is pretty much going to render me infertile. Which I realise isn't the end of the world, but just having that option removed from you forcibly is is the thing that's really not that great. I knew it was, you know, a potential with a less toxic version of chemotherapy, but it's pretty much guaranteed with this one. So never say never, but I'm kind of having to tell myself that it is a never, rather than kind of keep any possibility in mind, because I think that there would just be too much disappointment later on, I guess, if you know, if it was the case that that it wasn't able to happen, which is the most likely outcome. So I think we have to kind of accept that is the most likely outcome, and then, you know, if it does happen, then that'll be the second little miracle that we've got. So I guess we'll have to see how that goes. I'm probably going to do some more of these, just as a you know, I suppose, kind of through my journey. At some point there'll be probably a lot less of this as well. So yeah, so if you want to kind of follow it, if you're that, you know, if you're interested in what it's really like, not what social media says it's like, or if, you know, if you think there's anybody that's going through something similar that that it might be useful for them to kind of hear how someone else's journey goes, then by all means do give it a share. But otherwise, I guess I'm going to say goodbye for this time round, and perhaps I'll do another one once I've had my hip done or something like that. Goodness knows I'll have enough time on my hands with yet more recovery after yet more surgery. So yeah, I guess thanks for watching, I suppose. And yeah, chin up.